Good morning. I'm Ronnie Ziggy, and I'll be moderating today's virtual Insight service. I welcome each of you viewing this morning's virtual Insight program. We welcome everyone, all races, all faith backgrounds, all ethnicities, all gender identities, orientations, and expressions, all those who suffer disabilities, and all political perspectives who come in peace. We begin our program today with the chalice lighting, being especially mindful of the people in Texas who have and still are suffering through outages of electricity and water. If ever there were a time for a candle in the darkness, this would be it. Using a spark of hope, kindle the flame of love, ignite the light of peace, and feed the flame of justice. By Melanie Davis. Please join with me in the affirmation of covenant. Love is the doctrine of this church, and the quest of truth its sacrament, and service its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the good. Thus do we covenant with one another. Our tradition at UUVC is to be generous with time, talent, and treasures. So each week we take up a collection to show our commitment to ourselves and to the community at large. For the month of February, the recipient of our tradition of sharing is Imagination Library of the Washitas, which is an affiliate of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. It serves children in Garland, Montgomery, and Pike counties in Arkansas by providing a book a month for children from birth to age 5. You may contribute financially by sending your check payable to UUVC, making sure to write SHARE in the memo line, and mail to UUVC, 403 Barcelona Road, Hot Springs Village, 71909. Dave and Marie Welch moved to the village in 2010 after careers in education. They quickly became involved with village life, with Marie in theater and crafts. Dave became involved in the community service with Kiwanis Club, in politics, where he served as the county chair of his party, and with the Unitarian Universalist Village Church as president and now as past president. He writes children's books with his younger son and took up golf to play with his older son. He's been active in religious education as an insight speaker, not only for UUVC, but other UU churches as well. His paintings are sometimes displayed on the church's art wall. Dave and Marie have 2 married sons and 3 grandchildren in Colorado. Dave will speak about the hardiness factor. When the going gets tough, how do the tough get going? It isn't a secret that these are tough times. We are worried about our loved ones as well as ourselves. When can we get the shot, and how effective is it going to be? We are stuck at home and exhausting our creative energies to stay on track. What to do? Well, luckily there is a field of psychology to come to the rescue. It turns out that psychologists have studied this business of how people can cope with stress in their lives and have even identified some characteristics of people who seem to do okay, even in these stressful times. They call it the hardiness factor. We'll take a look at those characteristics this Sunday and even make a suggestion or two on how to tough it out. It's such a pleasure to welcome Dave Welch.
Good morning. It's good to be with you again. I'm Dave Welch. I want to talk to you about something a little different than I've talked to you about in the past. It's not about religious or spiritual concerns, but a more earthly and perhaps, as some people would have it, a more pressing issue. In fact, I'm going to throw some straight-out psychology at you. Now, that's my background. It seems reasonable that I could use it in these times. And as Ronnie said, it isn't any secret that these are hard times. We're worried about our loved ones, and we're worried about ourselves. We're worried about whether we can get our shots and when we're going to get them, and how effective they're going to be. So we're stuck at home, no pun intended, and exhausting our creative energies to stay on track. So what do we do? Well, luckily, again, Ronnie told us, there's the field of psychology. And psychologists have been studying this business of stress and how people cope with it for a pretty long period of time. And they've come up with some ideas about how people handle stress and about those people who do better in stress than others. And it's called the Hardiness factor. Well, come on. Let's dive right in. Once there was a silly old ram, thought he'd punch a hole in a dam. No one could make that ram scram. He kept a button that dam 'cause he had high hopes. He had high hopes. He had high apple pie in the sky. Hope so anytime you're feeling bad, instead of feeling sad, just remember that ram. Whoops, there goes a 1,000,000,000-kilowatt dam. Whoops, there goes a 1,000,000,000-kilowatt dam. Curb plunk. Well, sorry about that. Now, that silly little song, sung by Frank Sinatra entitled High Hopes, actually captures an important psychological principle, namely commitment. It's one of the three characteristics of psychological hardiness, and the other two are control and challenge, the three C's of hardiness. Let's talk about commitment. You know the story of two frogs, and they're walking along and they fall into a bucket of milk. And they're just happily hopping along and accidentally fall into this bucket, and the sides were so steep that they couldn't climb out. And one of the frogs didn't see any hope or any way of escape, and he gave up and sank to the bottom. And the other frog didn't see any way out either, but he kept on trying, kept on struggling, it kept on kicking. And then the frog began to feel something firm below its legs. Its constant churning had turned the milk into butter. And from the now hardened surface of the butter, the frog jumped out of the bucket. The point, of course, is that dealing with stuff in life takes more than one attempt. Interestingly, everything that makes our daily life easier, more productive, more enjoyable, more pleasurable now was created because of a problem in the past. And so it's obvious that the problems of the day can overwhelm us. They can wash over us like a rising tide and seem irresistible. But here's a fact. The rising water does have the capacity to drown us all, so why do some endure and survive and others sink? And that's the thing. It isn't so much the problems we have to face as it is the psychological way with which we solve them. Shakespeare gave us this: there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. It turns out that activities, things, and other people are all buffers against being overwhelmed. Research has revealed that people who coped with stress best had a tendency to involve themselves in activities and were interested in and curious about how others were coping and dealing with their problems. Two quick ideas come to mind. First is our church, and the second is the internet. Here at UUVC, we have been good about reaching out to others, Zooming with classes and interaction. And second, the internet allows us to reach beyond our community for ideas and even for entertainment. Now, I'm a poker player. I play poker every day. I'm also cheap, so I play for free. But I also play chess and checkers and do crosswords and read and make hiking sticks and paint. And I also have a partner who makes a long list of things for me to do. Let's finish this section with a definitional quote. People with the hardiness factor do not believe in giving up no matter what kind of obstacle they face. They seem to believe in the purpose of life and also the bond with the people they care about. Let's talk a little bit about control, the second factor in the hardiness concept. I've spoken with you about the serenity prayer in the past, and one popular version of that prayer goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Much of the focus on this prayer has been on the first line and of serenity and the power of God, and out of that a conviction that one should let go and let God. Now, I'm not going to argue with that, but for me, the second line is the most powerful. It clearly says that some things lie within our control. This factor is the tendency of hardy people to believe and act as if they can influence the events surrounding them through one's own actions. There's the story of 3 baseball umpires discussing their role behind the plate. And the first one says, some of them's balls and some of them's strikes, and I call them like they is. And the second says, well, some of them's balls and some of them's strikes, and I calls them like I sees them. And the third says, some's balls and some strikes, but they ain't nothing till I call them. And there's the clue. If we go back to the serenity prayer again, it also teaches that part of our control is about sorting out things over which we can have an influence and those which we cannot. Abraham Maslow, an American psychologist, had a funny way of saying this. He said, find out what you're not good at and don't do it. So the flip side of the coin is to do what you are good at, and that brings control into your life. Back when I was working, back in the working world, I had a habit. One of the first things I did in the morning at the office was to sit down and make a list of my obligations of the day, and then I would prioritize it. My rule was to do the hard stuff first, and when I had to push stuff off to another day, it was usually the easy, less important things on my list. I felt good about my day's accomplishments and in control. Let me move from America to the Far East for a second. There's a parable of the arrows that comes from the Buddha. The parable of the second arrow is a well-known Buddhist story about dealing with suffering more skillfully. It said that the Buddha once asked a student, if a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful? And if the person is struck by a second arrow, is it even more painful? He then went on to explain, in life, we can't always control the first arrow. The first arrow causes us physical pain, which we cannot ignore. The second arrow is the mental pain and suffering, which we add on top of the physical pain. That is the pain that we can control. Now, this is sometimes interpreted as meaning that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I'm not sure I would go that far. To my mind, there are clearly situations where to experience suffering and grief is the human and loving response. However, it's also true that our interpretation of events plays a large role in how we experience them, and that we can over-dramatize what happens to us. Sometimes we look at our problems through binoculars. Finally, challenge is the belief that change is the natural order of life rather than stability. And instead of threatening our security, it provides a motivating chance for personal growth. John F. Kennedy made the following phrase famous in his campaigns of 1959 and 1960. He said, in the Chinese language, the word crisis is composed of 2 characters, one representing danger and the other opportunity. Now, some argue that Kennedy mistranslated the Chinese character, but as we learned from John Wayne's movie, Who Shot Liberty Valance, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend. And so let's take it at face value. Crises can be dangerous, and yet they also offer the opportunity to find strengths and talents within ourselves that had not been called into use before. Hardy people seem to accept hard times as the normal course of events that being alive brings with it. They see it more as an opportunity than as a threat. Well, how do they do that? Well, there's another psychological concept you may have heard of. It's called reframing. Another name might be a defense mechanism or a defensive construct. And Aesop gave us a famous one, sour grapes. The fox wanted the grapes, but they hung too high on the vine. After jumping, climbing, and clawing without being able to reach them, the fox finally gave up and muttered, "I bet they were sour anyway." Who would want sour grapes, and so not worth the effort? It is possible to see these hard times as ones in which we are able to find a better version of ourselves, a version which sees the struggles, isolation, and stress as path to a greater creativity and challenge. Let's end on a light but thoroughly lifting note where hard times didn't win, but reframing did. A little boy in a baseball hat stands in the field with his ball and his bat, and he says, "I'm the greatest player of them all." He puts his bat on his shoulder and he tosses up his ball, and the ball goes up and the ball comes down. He swings his bat all the way around, and the world so still you can hear the sound. The ball falls to the ground. Now the little boy doesn't say a word. He picks up his ball and he's undeterred. He says, "I'm the greatest that there's ever been." And he grits his teeth and he tries again, and the ball goes up and the ball comes down. He swings his bat all the way around, and the world's so still you can hear the sound. The baseball falls to the ground. He makes no excuses and he shows no fear. He just closes his eyes and he listens to the cheers. The little boy, he adjusts his hat, picks up his ball, and he stares at his bat, and he says, "I'm the greatest when the game is on the line." And he gives it his all, one more time. And the ball goes up, and the moon is so bright, he swings his bat with all his might. The world is as still as can be. The baseball falls. And that's strike three. Now it's supper time, and his mama calls. The little boy starts home with his bat and his ball, and he says, "I'm the greatest, and that's a fact. But even I didn't know I could pitch like that." The little boy with the bat, through the power of the imagination, can transform himself from a batter into a pitcher and change failure into success. And a senior in a small community here in the South can transform a pandemic and fear into commitment, courage, and challenge, and transform stress and social isolation into action, involvement, and a sense of control over one's life. We're the greatest, and that's a fact. But even we didn't know we could adapt like that. And so it shall be, and so it is. Amen.
Right here, right now, is all I ever want. All my yesterdays and my tomorrows are right here, right now. It's what I waited for. Now I can say this is the best day of my life. Oh, 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 Right now, I want to step back, take a moment, take a deep breath. I want to take this in. Oh, right now, I want to slow it down, stop the world from turning round, so this moment never ends. If my eyes could stop the time, I'd take a picture in my mind and never let this feeling pass. And if my dreams could come to life and all my wishes realized, I would find a way to make this moment last. Right here, right now, is all I ever want. All my yesterdays and my tomorrows. All right here, right now, is what I waited for. Now I can say this is the best day of my life. Oh, 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 if I could, I would reach out, try to hold back the hands of time, if only just for a while. Oh, if I could, I would bring down all the stars up in the sky to shine on this moment in time. If I could stop the hourglass, the grains of sand before they pass. No future and no past. And if my dreams could come to life and all my wishes